The chandelier light fractured into cold diamonds across the marble floor of silver oak. Noon, but everything shimmered like winter glass. Harlan entered gray t-shirt baseball cap, low, moving through a sea of pressed suits and polite indifference. No one recognized the man who owned it all. He sat, voice sharp, ordering with a deliberate edge meant to test, not taste. When the waitress approached, she met his stare without flinch, steady, self-contained. In German, he said his words intentionally flawed. She answered in flawless precision, grammar clean tone, cool eyes unwavering. A brief silence fell. Even the forks hesitated. Harlan blinked once caught off guard and quietly opened his small black notebook. The line he wrote trembled slightly. She doesn't bow. The air shifted. Something fragile had cracked in him before the story even began. Stay till the end. This one hurts before it heals. Politeness hung in the air like perfume measured, rehearsed, exhausting. Every smile looked printed from the same mold, each laugh rehearsed to please an invisible score. Harlan sat quietly watching the rhythm of service efficient hollow. He changed his order again and again, tracing the limits of patience. Anna handled it without falter, her voice steady, her spine straight, dignity tucked neatly behind her words. Clifford Hale passed by, perfectly groomed his smile, thin, his eyes mechanical. He nodded to Harlan, unaware of the man's true role, before whispering an unnecessary correction to Anna. A regular customer entered. Their favorite table was cleared instantly, no hesitation, no fairness. Harlan's pen moved across the small leather notebook, courtesy like thin paint cracks under touch. Around him, laughter and chatter continued, but something inside him began to peel layer by layer, revealing the chill beneath the polish. Words turned into weapons wrapped in velvet. Harlan's voice carried mild sarcasm, a deliberate sting buried in softness. Anna answered in short, clear sentences, neither apologetic nor defensive, just exact. She adjusted the folded napkin on the tray, every crease sharp as discipline. Behind her, Mara Kincaid murmured, "Smile, don't react," a quiet warning shaped by fear. Anna's only reply was a nod. Her face remained composed, untouched by the demand to please. Clifford returned his tone too sweet, instructing her to add warmth when serving the VIPs. She nodded once, but her eyes betrayed no submission. From across the table, Harlan wrote, "Forced warmth, mechanical courtesy." The elegance of service, he realized, had become a cage of rules. Each gesture, perfect silent, hid the faint sound of something breaking inside. The crystal glass chimed faintly as it touched the table, the sound pure and sharp. Harlan asked for another bottle. Same label, same year as reason. Vague. Anna didn't flinch. She explained the difference in tone and temperature-precise professional without bending her pride into apology. Her name tag, slightly scratched, caught the light. She could have replaced it, she didn't. Clifford marked her name in the shift ledger, his smile courteous but loaded. Harlan noticed the gesture, his hand tightening on the notebook. "She draws her line," he wrote. Around them, service continued in smooth perfection, yet the scene held tension, a quiet duel fought not with noise, but with restraint. Anna remained composed, refusing to let deference erase her dignity. Harlan, behind the guise of arrogance, recognized the rare strength of someone who could serve without surrender. The kitchen breathed heat and resignation. A plate came back untouched, and the cooks only shrugged their indifference, as routine as the smoke curling above the pans. Mara wrapped her palm in a bandage after a quick burn, no complaint, no sound. Anna noticed, stepped in to help her tie it tighter. Clifford's voice sliced through, "Back to your station." The command was smooth, almost gentle, but final. Harlan stood nearby, pretending to examine a painting on the wall, his eyes watching the chain of submission unfold. The head chef signed a slip confirming fault, yet the name written belonged to Anna. Paper over truth, signature over fairness. No protest followed. Anna resumed her shift with the same grace face calm, eyes dry. Around her, everyone knew this was how the system survived, by feeding on the quiet. Harlan felt the weight of that silence pressing against his own disguise. At his table by the window, Harlan numbered each note in neat script. Observation. 6. Distortion of accountability. Beneath it, he underlined Clifford's name twice, then circled the word dignity. He ordered something near impossible steak with adjusted sauce temperature precisely timed. It was meant to corner her to test the limits of precision. Anna moved with calm efficiency, calling instructions back to the kitchen in exact terms, never flustered. The order returned perfect cut, right temperature sauce, balanced. No drama, no delay. Harlan tapped the notebook, eyes narrowing with respect. She wasn't just kind, she was competent, surgical in her focus. The kind of excellence that asked for nothing yet exposed everyone around her. Outside, the light shifted, gleaming off his watch. He wrote one more line, slow and deliberate. Some people don't serve, they elevate. The VIP complained about the draft. Clifford fixed it instantly, moving others aside without hesitation. A family who had waited 40 minutes stood quietly by the door, the child asleep against her mother's arm. Anna noticed, fetched a cup of warm water, placed it gently beside them without a word. Clifford caught her in the act, his glare sharp, a finger to his lips, reminding her of policy. She nodded, not defiant, just aware. Harlan watched the exchange, his gaze shifting from the sleeping child to the silver oak logo gleaming above the host stand. Prestige reflected in chrome, yet void of warmth. He wrote a single line across the page. Privilege served, first humanity last. Around him, glasses clinked, laughter rose, but the sound felt brittle. The name of his empire sparkled everywhere, and for the first time he wondered if it had become a symbol of everything he once despised. Table 17 sat by the window, beautiful in theory, miserable in truth, the wind slipping through the seams of the glass like cold breath. Harlan requested a seat change, twice his tone, courteous but meant to probe. Anna didn't flinch or flatter. She paused, observed, and proposed a simple fix, a temporary screen to block the draft and a quiet shift in the chair's angle. Practical, efficient. The couple thanked her, their comfort restored. She only smiled, brief and genuine, before moving on. Clifford approached, his grin polished. Good initiative, he said aloud, then added softly, maybe next time try to charm them a little more. Harlan caught the tone, the mock praise, and made a mark in his notebook, solves, not pleases. Anna didn't notice his gaze. She had already turned toward another table. Her grace was not performative, it was structured, deliberate, the kind that held a room steady without demanding to be seen. Harlan leaned back, swirling the glass between his fingers. "Tell me," he said, in fast-clipped German, "where's this wine?" From Anna, answered, fluently, a rhythm precise, then expanded with quiet enthusiasm about the soil and the slopes of the Rhine. He pretended confusion, pushed her to repeat. She slowed down, voice steady, accuracy intact. The two German guests nearby exchanged impressed glances, murmuring approval. Clifford's eyes darted from across the room, narrowing. He saw confidence and mistook it for showmanship. Anna merely stepped aside, letting her explanation breathe on its own. Harlan scribbled, "Knowledge isn't performance, it's poise." He found himself listening genuinely to a language that no longer sounded foreign. There was intellect beneath her composure, but more than that, a rare fluency of spirit, the ability to make understanding itself feel like respect. For the first time that afternoon, Harlan smiled without forcing it. The bell in the kitchen rang again, metallic and relentless. Plates moved faster, orders piled like dominoes. Anna's steps never broke rhythm. Her eyes stayed calm, her hands precise. A silver tray slipped from a counter. She caught it, mid-air movement, clean and unshaken. Across the room, Clifford's voice carried over the noise, "Smile more." The phrase had become an unspoken metronome of obedience. Anna didn't react. She delivered each plate with quiet focus, the edges of her patience stitched tight but intact. Harlan lifted his eyes to the clock, the second hand dragging in deliberate cruelty. Around him, efficiency had the pulse of exhaustion. He wrote one line. Discipline doesn't kill, absurdity does. She was the still point in the storm, the proof that composure could defy command. Watching her, he began to wonder if resilience might be a language too, and if anyone else here still understood it. The kitchen felt like a battlefield disguised in stainless steel. Heat pulsed through the vents, and the faint scent of burnt butter clung to the air like smoke after combat. Harlan passed through, quietly observing the choreography of speed hands darting orders, shouted perfection demanded, but never paused for. The head chef signed a complaint slip with mechanical precision. No glance, no question. Anna received the next dish, checked the temperature instantly, her eyes reading the sear-like text. Clifford appeared at her shoulder, voice sharp, too slow. She said nothing, simply adjusted the plate and carried on. Mara stepped forward, covering for her, taking the next delivery before Clifford's words could cut deeper. Harlan noted everything, his pen carving through paper, inspection mistaken for delay. Protection labeled inefficiency. Around him, noise and urgency ruled, but in the quiet corners, truth was plain. The kitchen no longer cooked for taste, only for time. In the narrow break room, Clifford marked a red circle next to Anna's name on the shift ledger. The pen stroke looked casual, almost decorative. Mara saw it first. Her face paled. "Be careful," she whispered. Anna only smiled faintly and returned to her tasks. Outside, a new customer praised the meal's precision, thanking Clifford directly. He accepted, gracious as though he'd plated it himself. Harlan's gaze drifted to the red mark, the symbol so small yet weighted like a verdict. He wrote, quietly, "Leadership blind spot." The phrase felt too polite for what it meant, a theft wrapped in protocol. Anna bowed slightly to the customer who had just complimented her work, but Clifford stepped forward, intercepting the thanks. She didn't correct him. Her silence wasn't defeat. It was restraint and armor worn by those who've learned that dignity sometimes means swallowing the noise. During a lull, Mara's voice dropped low. She spoke of her mother, a single woman, battling illness, her pay barely enough for medicine. Anna listened, then slipped a folded envelope across the counter. "Take it," she said simply. Mara hesitated, eyes wet. Clifford's shadow crossed the doorway. His gaze caught the motion, suspicion flickering behind the polished smile. Harlan, seated at the corner, witnessed the exchange. No words passed between them, only a human stillness that felt heavier than sound. He opened his notebook, writing one word in thick, deliberate ink: kindness. The kitchen bell rang again, cutting through the moment. Anna turned back to work, her face unchanged. Generosity, Harlan realized, wasn't spectacle. It was survival shared in silence. The scene lingered in his chest long after the warmth of it, both fragile and defiant against the cold machinery of everything around them. The framed poster near the kitchen door read, "Hospitality First." It hung crooked, its glass clouded with dust. Passing by, Harlan straightened it out of habit, then noticed the grime clinging to the frame, the faint fingerprint smudges no one bothered to clean. Beneath it, pinned to the same wall, was an internal penalty chart. Each name bore a reason: late smile, uneven tone, insufficient warmth. Clifford's voice cut through the clatter, calling out the latest offense: Anna for not smiling wide enough. The irony struck deeper than the words themselves. The rule of service had become the cage of sincerity. Anna stood still, saying nothing. She met his eyes once, then lowered them, not in defeat, but in quiet refusal. Harlan jotted a line into his notebook. Principles turned to shackles. Around them, the poster gleamed faintly like a lie framed in light, its promise flaking at the edges. A couple from Bavaria asked about the special. Their accent was thick, their curiosity gentle. Anna switched languages, effortlessly explaining the difference between the Rhine and southern vineyards, her tone, even her phrasing, clear. Harlan, half listening, joined in with a question about terroir, probing for showmanship. Instead, she offered precision, plain, graceful knowledge, stripped of vanity. The couple smiled, grateful for her clarity. Clifford arrived moments too late, heard her finish, and said curtly, "Let's not overtalk with guests." Anna only nodded. The customers left happy, unaware of the quiet tension they'd walked through. Harlan's pen moved again, knowledge not display. It wasn't the language that impressed him, it was restraint, the intellect anchored in humility. For the first time he saw that service could be scholarship too, one that spoke truth without embellishment. Her fluency wasn't charm. It was composure born of self-respect. By evening, the reservation list stretched longer than usual. Too few hands, too many demands. Clifford reassigned tables, pushing most of the load toward Anna, efficient cruelty masked as trust. Mara pleaded to trade shifts to care for her mother. Anna agreed instantly, no hesitation. The air thickened with premonition, a hum of unease beneath the polish. Harlan left earlier than usual, standing outside the glass doors. Through the reflection he saw her wiping a table, tying her hair back tighter, eyes fixed but distant. The city lights bled into the restaurant's soft glow, their edges trembling like warning signs. He wrote his final note for the night. Tomorrow the string will snap. Behind the glass, Anna moved like someone walking inside a storm, not yet formed, still dry, still calm, but already aware of the thunder forming somewhere close, inevitable, and near. The morning opened with the chill of stainless steel. The kitchen gleamed under fluorescent light, every surface polished to a sterile shine. The smell of bitter coffee drifted through the hall, sharp and grounding. Anna arrived before her shift, inspecting each setup, plates aligned, cutlery straight, glasses spotless. Clifford walked in, his voice colorless, reading the schedule as if it were a court verdict. Harlan sat in his usual corner hat, pulled low, silent observer behind the hum of routine. Then came the whisper. The large tip from the previous night was missing. Mara's eyes darted toward the counter, panic rising, but no one spoke. Clifford brushed it off too quickly. The air stiffened. Anna glanced at the empty envelope slot, her expression unreadable. Harlan's pen moved once, money gone, truth pending. The scent of metal and espresso mingled like tension itself. Something small had vanished, but it felt like the start of collapse. The restaurant filled fast, the wait list spilling beyond the door. A VIP party arrived, late, their entitlement sweeping in ahead of them. Clifford bowed, reshuffled the seating plan, pushing earlier reservations aside. Anna adjusted chairs near the window, blocking the persistent draft with quiet precision. Harlan, now in the role of restless customer, requested another bottle, the third of the evening. As she turned to fetch it, the tray slipped just enough for a single drop of red to bleed into the white tablecloth. A perfect accident magnified by the silence that followed. Clifford's voice rang across the floor, Anna. Just that her name heavy with accusation. The music dulled, eyes turned. Harlan's pulse stilled. The air thickened. One stain, one drop, one spark, small, but enough to ignite everything the restaurant had been holding back. The room exhaled judgment before truth could even breathe. Lack of focus, Clifford declared before anyone could speak. The VIPs leaned back amused, watching as if it were dinner theater. Anna explained calmly, Table 12's setup, glass-height napkin exchange, all procedural exact. Clifford dismissed her, insisting efficiency was lost. Mara stepped forward, tried to intervene, but his hand lifted, silencing her without touch. Harlan remained motionless, his eyes cold and unblinking, recording every word like evidence. Clifford pulled a slip from his folder, already filled out the accusation pre-written. He placed it before Anna, a formality disguised as justice. She stared at it for a moment, then looked away. The customers smiled, faintly entertained by the hierarchy at work. Harlan's jaw tightened. The process was flawless, the cruelty invisible. In his notebook he wrote only one line policy sharp enough to cut through conscience. The machine worked perfectly as long as no one dared to be human. Clifford's tone sharpened, cutting through the room. "Apologize," he said, pointing toward the table still marked by the crimson drop. The guests waited, entertained by power disguised as etiquette. Anna straightened her expression, composed but unyielding. "I'll replace the wine and bring a clean cloth," she replied quietly, "but I won't apologize for something I didn't cause." The hum of the restaurant faltered, spoons stopped mid-air, conversations froze. Clifford's jaw flexed, disbelief flashing beneath his polished smile. Harlan's hand hovered over his notebook but stayed closed, his silence a restraint heavier than words. The light caught Anna's eyes. They shimmered, not with tears but with defiance softened by grace. Clifford hissed, "Leave the floor." She nodded, once no tremor in her step. The sound of her heels faded against marble. In the hush that followed, even arrogance felt ashamed of itself. For the first time, Harlan felt pride in someone other than himself. The hallway behind the dining room was dim, lined with lockers and old uniforms. Anna walked through it slowly, her shadow stretching long against the metal. Mara rushed after her, breath, uneven, eyes wet. "You didn't have to," she whispered. Anna stopped, turned her face calm. "Don't lose your part of yourself." She said simple words, weight heavy as truth. The locker door beside her trembled shut, as if echoing the finality of it. Harlan appeared at the far end, unseen by them, watching. He paused a heartbeat longer than necessary before continuing on. In his notebook later he wrote, "Keep your back straight." It wasn't instruction. It was a reminder to her, to him, to anyone still trapped in a system that taught bending as survival. The air in the hallway felt heavier, but somehow cleaner, purged of pretense. By morning, the missing tip resurfaced as accusation. Clifford hinted at its loss in Anna's section voice, calm but crafted to wound. The staff exchanged glances, unease rippling under the clatter of dishes. "We'll check the cameras." Someone offered, then came the sign, "Camera out of service." Too convenient, too clean. Harlan's gaze lingered on it, his suspicion tightening into certainty. Mara's hands fidgeted at her apron, her silence trembling between fear and loyalty. Clifford moved on, satisfied, leaving behind a trail of doubt polished to perfection. Anna said nothing, only returned to polishing glasses, her face unreadable. The clinking crystal sounded sharper than usual, almost accusing. Harlan wrote, "Failures that happen on time are never accidents." Around him, the restaurant continued its performance, impeccable service, poisoned core. What vanished wasn't just money, it was proof stolen before it could speak. The machine protected itself, flawless in its cruelty. Clifford stood by the storeroom door, blocking Anna's path with a calmness that felt heavier than anger. His tone was soft, too soft, the kind that hid a threat inside courtesy. "We should talk," he said, a phrase that never meant conversation. Anna met his gaze and replied evenly, "Then let's call HR by policy. They should be present." Clifford smiled without warmth. "I am the policy," he said, stepping half an inch closer. The fluorescent light flickered between them, the air thick with a kind of quiet coercion. At the far end of the corridor, Harlan appeared, observing, unmoving, his silence stretching like a held breath. Anna didn't back away. She sidestepped, walking around Clifford with unbroken composure, not giving defiance the satisfaction of drama. Her stride was straight, almost serene. Harlan's eyes followed her, his note forming itself before the pen even touched paper, defiance lawful and precise. She hadn't fought him. She had simply rendered him irrelevant. The smell of char reached the dining hall before the plate did. A pan had burned on the line, a small mistake magnified by haste. The head chef scrawled on a slip and tossed it toward the service counter, blame already assigned. Clifford appeared swift to transfer fault from kitchen to floor. "Server's delay," he muttered, logging it under Anna's name without a pause. Mara tried to intervene, claiming she'd handled the table, but Clifford waved her off. The food went out anyway, perfectly plated, flavors intact. Table 9 smiled, praising the dish. No one wrote that part down. Harlan, watching from afar, noticed the contradiction. His eyes lingered on the untouched error report still hanging by the pass window. Record the fault, he thought, erase the merit. The fluorescent light above flickered red for a moment, like an alarm that no one heard. In Silver Oak, truth never burned, it just got quietly overcooked. In the staff washroom, the mirror's surface glowed with cold light. Anna looked at her reflection, straightened her collar, ran a hand through her hair. Her name tag caught the glare, a faint scratch cutting through the letter A. Mara appeared behind her, holding a new badge, polished and perfect. "Take this one," she said gently. Anna shook her head. "No, let it stay." The old tag reflected backward in the mirror, her name reversed but unmistakable. At that moment, Harlan entered the hallway, pausing just long enough to see her face in reflection, the line of resolve beneath the exhaustion. From somewhere beyond, the laughter of the VIP table leaked through a hollow, easy sound that felt foreign here. Harlan closed his notebook slowly. The scratch on her tag said more than words could. It wasn't damage. It was proof of endurance, a record of integrity refusing to shine too clean. The office behind the dining room smelled faintly of disinfectant and burnt coffee. Clifford sat behind the desk, crisp and composed, the form already waiting. "Disciplinary report," he said. The HR seat beside him was empty. "We'll sign provisionally." Anna scanned the paper, calm, deliberate. "Policy requires a witness," she said, pointing to the clause printed neatly at the bottom. Clifford smiled, the kind that didn't reach his eyes. "I'm enough." Her breath stilled, but she didn't lower her gaze. Harlan stood a few feet away, silent, his shadow crossing the floor like a held verdict. Mara stepped forward, trembling. "I'll sign as witness." Clifford waved her off with a flick of irritation. The pen moved anyway, his signature gliding like authority unchecked. The sound of it filled the small room louder than it should have been. Harlan watched the stroke, his jaw rigid. The system was airtight, lawful enough to strangle truth. Anna folded her apron with precision, each corner aligned her movements, measured as if order itself could hold her together. She handed over the shift ledger without hesitation, the ink from Clifford's signature still fresh. Passing Harlan on her way out, she paused only for a nod, small, almost ceremonial. He didn't speak. Behind her, Mara's quiet sob broke the silence, a single note of sorrow that trembled and stopped. Anna turned, rested a hand on her shoulder, a gesture of reassurance that felt more final than goodbye. The door to the staff exit opened, letting in a sweep of night air, sharp, cold, honest. Her hair lifted slightly in the breeze as she stepped out. Harlan watched her go, the light catching only her silhouette before the door shut. In his chest, something wordless settled, admiration laced with shame. She had left with nothing yet, carried everything that mattered. After the shift ended, the dining hall emptied into stillness. Harlan remained at his table, the white napkin folded like a promise beside his untouched drink. He took a small card from his wallet, wrote a single line. "Kindness remembers." No signature, no seal. He slid it under the glass, the edge barely visible. Minutes later, Clifford arrived to clear the table. He saw the card, frowned, and pocketed it, assuming it irrelevant. But Mara, walking past, had caught a glimpse, the words burned in her mind, echoing louder than the music that once filled the room. Outside, the clock struck closing time. The lights dimmed, the windows turned to black mirrors reflecting an empty space that felt anything but. Somewhere within that reflection, Harlan stood, his outline dissolving into the dark. The message stayed silent, but deliberate, a quiet seed waiting to break open what arrogance had sealed shut. The announcement came without warning. Staff were summoned to the main hall, no reason, no agenda. Clifford stood at the front, shoulders squared, confidence rehearsed. His smile was the same one he used for investors, polished hollow. Conversations dimmed as Harlan entered from the side corridor wearing the same gray t-shirt, the same cap. Yet something in his walk shifted the air, calm, deliberate, commanding, without effort. He approached the long walnut table, the same one where Clifford usually lectured about efficiency. The room felt smaller. Harlan placed his worn notebook on the surface. The soft thud echoed louder than expected. For a moment, he simply looked around, each face, each uniform, each forced smile. Then he removed his cap. The motion was simple, but it cracked the illusion. silence pooled heavy and alert. Clifford's expression flickered first confusion, then unease. Somewhere deep down he knew the order of power had just reversed, though no one had spoken a word. I'm Harlan Pierce." The words came quietly unforced, but the effect was seismic. A pen fell the sound, sharp as glass. Clifford's grin froze mid-gesture, his composure collapsing in slow motion. Mara covered her mouth eyes wide. No one breathed. The little white card Kindness Remembers lay beside the leather notebook, its meaning now sharpened to a blade. Harlan's gaze swept across the room, calm, unblinking, giving no one shelter in pretense. The stillness was unbearable. Truth had entered without raising its voice. "I sat among you," he said, tone level, "and saw what hospitality means when no one's watching." Clifford's hands tightened at his sides, the blood leaving his face. Power, once loud and performative, had found a new shape, quiet, anchored, absolute. The man they dismissed as ordinary had just reclaimed the ground beneath their feet. Every polite lie in the room seemed to wilt under the weight of his real name. Harlan opened the notebook, each page a mirror held to the room. His voice remained low steady, the cadence of control refined by restraint. "Table 9, he began. "Blame reassigned to the wrong person. Table 17, favoritism over fairness. The missing tip fabricated as evidence. Every example fell like measured rain, precise, undeniable. Clifford's name appeared more than once, his misconduct pinned to timestamps and witnesses. No one interrupted. A few employees nodded faintly, others stared at the floor, shame flickering like candlelight. Harlan never raised his tone. He didn't need to. His authority lived in evidence, not volume. Silver Oak, he said finally, was built to honor people, not polish appearances. The silence that followed was clean stripped of pretense. Even Clifford, trembling, couldn't find the courage to lie. It wasn't a speech, it was a reckoning. And in its quiet, the company's soul began its slow, painful return to truth. No shouting, no spectacle, only consequence. Harlan stood at the front, the authority in his posture, calm but final. Effective immediately, he said, "Mr. Clifford Hale is suspended pending independent investigation." The sentence landed softly but with the precision of a blade. Clifford's protest died before it formed. No one stepped forward to defend him. Harlan continued instructing the team to audit all tip records and security footage from the last 3 months. A woman from QA was named acting manager, her eyes wide with disbelief. There was no applause, only the sound of collective exhalation, the release of air long held. For the first time, fairness had an address. Harlan's gaze swept the room, steady, searching. "Where's Anna?" he asked quietly. Mara's hand trembled as she answered, voice thin, eyes wet. The question lingered like a chord, unresolved. Justice had arrived, but it felt incomplete without the one who'd borne its cost. The phone on the old locker bench vibrated against the metal, the hum echoing through the quiet break room. Anna's name flashed across the screen. She picked it up, listening without surprise, her tone even. "Understood," she said simply. By the time she arrived, the lobby was bathed in amber light, the last breath of evening bending through the tall glass doors. Every head turned as the door opened. Her steps were measured, neither hesitant nor proud, simply grounded. The same gray floor that had witnessed her humiliation now received her return. Harlan waited near the walnut table, expression unreadable but eyes soft with respect. The air seemed to shift as though something broken had found alignment again. The sound of her shoes echoed against the marble, a quiet declaration she hadn't come back to ask, but to stand. Every gaze in the room followed her as if watching gravity reassert itself. Harlan faced her before everyone, no podium, no script. "Thank you, Anna," he said, his tone stripped of formality. "For every time you chose what's right over what's easy." She didn't bow, didn't smile, just nodded once, her calm absorbing the weight of his words. Around them, the staff shifted faces, taut with recognition. Harlan turned slightly toward the others. "We failed her," He said the statement landing like a confession. We let her carry what belonged to all of us. The silence that followed was dense but not cold. It was the collective realization of shared guilt softened by relief. Mara exhaled audibly, and a few heads bowed not in shame, but in something closer to reverence. It wasn't an apology wrapped in ceremony, it was truth made visible. For the first time, dignity wasn't whispered in corners. It stood at the center of the room, breathing. The next morning, the hall was rearranged not for confrontation this time, but for renewal. Harlan stood before his staff no longer undercover, no longer the quiet observer. We build systems, he said, so they can protect what we once forgot, dignity. He unveiled the new initiative, Dignity First. Bonuses and penalties would now be reviewed by committee, not by single hands. Language classes would be funded for frontline workers because communication, he said, should empower, not separate. He invited Anna to join a newly formed Customer Experience Advisory Board, her perspective now written into the company's fabric. Training for managers across every branch was scheduled. No one would operate without accountability again. For a heartbeat, silence held. Then, slow and hesitant, came applause, not loud, not showy, but real. Harlan looked toward the window where sunlight fell across the polished floor, thinking how redemption was never declared, it had to be designed. Later that afternoon, Harlan and Anna sat by the window table, the same one where she had once been tested. Between them, 2 glasses of water rested, untouched condensation, gathering like quiet time. Outside, the sun stretched across the marble floor, warm but not intrusive. Harlan spoke less now, listening as if he owed her every second. Anna told him about her small evening class for immigrant children, how she used old menus to teach vocabulary, how their laughter filled the borrowed community hall. It's small, she said, but it makes them feel seen. He nodded, tracing the rim of his glass with one finger, letting the weight of her words settle. They didn't argue, didn't fill the silence. It was the kind of quiet that spoke of understanding. The world outside moved on, but here, for a brief moment, 2 people shared the same horizon. Finally level, finally human. Language lets people be seen. Anna said, her voice steady, almost reflective. She spoke of her mother, the early years in America, the confusion, the sting of laughter when words failed. On the shelf at home still sat the same dictionary, its spine-cracked corners softened by years of use. She carried it everywhere, Anna said. Her accent embarrassed her, but that book gave her courage. Harlan listened, the light shifting between them, refracted through the untouched water. Anna smiled faintly. The children I teach, they stumble on words the same way. I want to erase that shame before it grows. For a long moment he didn't answer, just watched the condensation drip down the glass like passing time. Then he nodded once. Let's make sure this company speaks that language too, he said quietly. It wasn't corporate talk, it was a promise disguised as empathy, the start of kindness with structure. Harlan spoke simply his words, steady and measured. The company would sponsor Anna's language classes quietly without banners or logos. Scholarships would be offered to employees who wished to study no press release, no stage. A new anonymous feedback line would track not complaints but culture. We'll measure by stories, he said, not statistics. Anna's smile was small but genuine, the kind that carried more weight than applause. Outside, workers replaced the restaurant's slogan on the glass facade. The new phrase caught sunlight, subtle, almost easy to miss. Kindness speaks every language. Harlan didn't look proud, he looked resolved. It wasn't charity, it was correction. For the first time, generosity had learned to whisper. When the meeting ended, Harlan stood adjusting the brim of his cap. The late afternoon light turned the glass door into a mirror, his reflection merging with the silver letters of Silver Oak. Behind him, Anna closed her notebook, her next lesson already sketched in pencil. Mara passed by, her wave, small familiar like life returning to normal. The clatter of dishes resumed in the distance, soft and human. Harlan paused once more, watching the reflection where his shadow overlapped with the company's name. Power and purpose finally the same shape. Then he turned and walked out, leaving no speech behind, only balance restored. The new sign glowed softly beside the entrance, simple words, no gloss, no slogans, pride. Inside, immigrant children took their seats, notebooks fresh pages, bright with possibility. Anna opened the first lesson, two alphabets side by side, the bridge between belonging and isolation. Former staff volunteered to help, laughter replacing the old hush of fear. Outside, Harlan walked past the glass, his reflection fading into daylight. The door closed behind him, catching one last streak of sun. Change wasn't loud. It was structured, sustainable, human. Kindness had stopped being a moment, it had become a system that could teach.